So I know this is usually a boxing channel, but I've decided that now that I'm returning to making videos, I'm going to start talking a lot more about football or soccer. If I call it soccer, the Brits in the comments will lay it on me. So I'm going to call it football because it's the proper name of the sport. And there's a big problem specifically in English football right now where the three promoted sides every year that come up are just completely and utterly outmatched. It started kind of post COVID. There was one big exception, and that was the 2022-2023 season when Fulham, Bournemouth, and Nottingham Forest were promoted to the Premier League, and all of them survived. And I can recall that year a lot of people had definitely Fulham and Bournemouth going straight back down because Fulham were a massive yo-yo club, kind of like Norwich City were, and they surprised everybody that season. They did incredibly well. They really exceeded everybody's expectations. As for Nottingham Forest, they had to break the rules to survive, basically, financially. They broke FFP because they spent over £100 million on players. They signed so many players. I remember that summer transfer window, and they barely survived. Even after spending all that money, they still at times in that season looked totally outmatched. So those three survive. You have Leicester, Southampton, and Leeds get relegated that season. So it's shocking, like Leicester going down. That was the big surprise. So Burnley, Luton, and Sheffield United are the teams that come up in 23-24. And those sides, you had a feeling Luton and Sheffield United were really going to struggle. Especially Luton, because they used the parachute money, the Premier League money, um, to build a new stadium, to work on their club's infrastructure. They didn't want to do what Nottingham Forest did and spend an absolute huge sum of money to try to stay up. They didn't want to risk their they didn't want to risk their financial stability to survive relegation because there's a chance they could have spent a crap ton of the TV money that the Premier League gives and still go down. So were they were trying to be sensible. They had a feeling, look, we might go back down to the championship. So what we're going to do, we're going to sign loan guys like Ryan Giles. We're going to sign Marvelous Nakamba, players that if we do go down, we can go straight back up to the Premier League. Obviously, this season, it's been a disaster for Luton Town in the championship, but that was not what was intended. As for Burnley, they spent a lot of money under Vincent Company, and they dominated the championship the year before. They were truly spectacular. Over 100 points. That had the only other time I believe that was done was Reading, in the early 2000s. Reading did it, so they almost broke the record for the most points in a season. And I remember a lot of YouTubers specifically had Burnley like 13th in their predictions that year, and I had them staying up as well. I thought they would easily survive because I thought Company would adjust tactically to the Premier League. Um, and Burnley basically did a 2018 to 2019 Fulham. They came up and they didn't stop playing their brand of football that they played in the championship, and they got blown wide open defensively. Even that first game against Man City, it was you expect them to lose to Man City, but it was a complete capitulation defensively in that opening weekend game. And they were on the end of a lot of beatings that year. They were worse than Luton were, Burnley. Not by much, only by 2 points in the end. But Burnley were the big disappointment of the three last year. And Sheffield United were just they sold their two best players before the season started. They got rid of Sander Berge. They sold him to Burnley. They sold him to a relegation rival. So I think Sheffield United were just waving the white flag from the beginning. They were waving the white flag. They already knew they were going back down. They just wanted to get the Premier League money and go. And that has become a trend. And you have to ask why. Why is this happening? And I think the pandemic has a lot to do with it because these clubs in the championship were operating at a massive loss in revenue. Massive loss. And it was just a disaster financially for the EFL because the EFL needs support from the Premier League's big money to stay afloat, at least during the pandemic, because there was no fans in seats. And those clubs get a lot of their revenue from ticket sales. And when the stadiums were empty for a full season, pretty much, 2021, almost the whole year, the stadiums were empty, they lost a lot of money. And they were... So clubs like Norwich, they realize, look, we are going to get promoted, but we're not going to spend a lot of money and risk going down with a bunch of overpaid, talented players that are going to leave on high wages. We're just not going to do it. And these clubs are getting promoted now, and they're not taking the chances that, like, Nottingham Forest was obviously an exception, but they have a very rich owner. Leeds will be interesting next year, but we'll get to that later. So now you go to this year's promoted three. Obviously, Burnley, Luton, and Sheffield United all went straight back down. It was the first time in years that all three of the promoted sides went straight back down. So now you have Leicester coming back, Southampton coming straight back, and then Ipswich, who came from League One, double promoted. I mean, they were incredible. It's not like Ipswich scraped into the top 6 with 73 points in the championship and barely got promoted. Ipswich Town genuinely dominated. They got automatic promotion on no parachute payments, which is unbelievable. Unbelievable. I believe they got like 96 points, which most seasons would win you the title in the championship, but I believe Leicester got 99, was it? So Leicester got 99. Ipswich come up. And you think that they're going to be significantly better than Luton and Sheffield United were. And as for Leicester, I believe they would surely do better than Luton and Sheffield United, and even Burnley. Because Leicester had been in the Premier League for years. They won the title, for God's sake, in 2016. They won the FA Cup in 2021. You think with Leicester, like, okay, they went down for a season. They'll come back up, even though their financial situation wasn't great. And they'll at least be competitive. And with the only reason I did pick Leicester to get relegated was because it seemed a certainty back in August that they were getting a points deduction for financial fair play breaches. So obviously with a 10-point deduction, there's no way in hell they're staying up. They'd have to get like 45 points without, if you don't count the 10 that it was looking like a 10-point deduction for Leicester City. And they are on 17 points right now on March 5th. They have 4 wins. They have 18 losses on the season. They have been on the end of some poundings, especially since Steve Cooper left. Steve Cooper had Leicester City somewhat competitive. They drew that opening game against Tottenham. They got a few good results in there. They were able to score goals. Vardy was playing like the old Vardy. Mavididi, of course, excellent player. Obviously, losing Fatawu on the wing was a huge loss for Leicester, and they just didn't have the depth to replace him, unfortunately. So Leicester, I really thought, if you would have told me back in August, look, they're not going to get a points deduction, I would have said, Leicester will stay up then. They'll stay up. I did see the writing on the wall for Ipswich and Southampton. Ipswich only because they had a lot of League One players. Ipswich had a lot of League One players. They did buy some good talent in the summer. They bought Jacob Greaves from my club, Hull City. That was a tough loss for us, and he's a great defender. But they bought championship players. Liam Delap, another Hull player who was excellent for us last season under Rosenior. Liam Delap is a great striker, but can he get you enough goals in the Premier League to keep you up? Ipswich were always going to be an uphill battle, and they have honestly been the most competitive out of the three. They only have 17 points like Leicester, but they have genuinely had a lot of results where they just blew the game, and they haven't Ipswich have done better, I feel like, against the top opposition than they have against the teams they need to beat in a relegation battle. If Ipswich were to have any shot of staying up, they had to beat Southampton at home. You just can't lose that game. So Ipswich are out of luck, in my opinion. They're definitely down. They're 5 points behind Wolves like Leicester, but Wolves just have too much quality. And as for Southampton, I really didn't think anybody could be worse than Sheffield United were last year, or Sheffield United were in the 23-24 season. Sheffield United got like 16 points. Southampton are on 9 points in March. I mean, it is just a complete... They were relegated in December. I mean, I have not watched a lot of Southampton this year, but I did watch their game against Chelsea. And, it was bad. It was really bad. So I think the Premier League has a huge problem on their hands. All three of these clubs are going to go straight back down. It will be the second year in a row that all three promoted sides have gone straight back down. And it's becoming a problem because the Premier League is supposed to be a league where anybody can beat anybody. Even the teams at the bottom can give Man City and Arsenal and Liverpool a tough game here and there. And honestly, for the last 2 years, you're looking at the record set. So Southampton, Leicester, and Ipswich are on pace to combine for a total of 63 points. Burnley, Sheffield, and Luton, who were awful last year, got a combined 66 points when the season was over. And I really thought these three would be better than those three. And it's not gone that way at all. And now, last year I said it was a one-off. This year it's a trend. And a lot of other YouTubers are making videos on this and how the Premier League has a huge problem on their hands. I'm seeing fans of championship clubs like Burnley, Vizé, for example. If you follow the YouTuber Vizé, he's like, I don't want to get promoted. I don't want to be in the Premier League again. Because we're just going to get battered every week. The golfing class is becoming a big problem. It's becoming a huge problem. And it's also becoming a problem in the championship because teams with parachute payments are coming down to the championship, right? And they're just dominating. Obviously, Luton are the outlier there. But Burnley are going to be up and down twice in the next 2 years. They're looking like Norwich City right now. It started with Norwich City. They were not the first yo-yo club. That was called the Boing Boing Baggies. West Bromwich Albion were considered the first yo-yo club. But Norwich and Fulham were after that. Now Burnley and Sheffield United are the new yo-yo clubs. They keep coming up. They're too good for the championship, not good enough for the Premier League. Sheffield United had 16 points last year. This year, they have 23 wins, 6 draws, 6 losses in the championship. It's staggering. Burnley only have 2 losses all season in the championship. Obviously, they're third right now. So now I look ahead to next year. Let's say it is Leeds, Burnley, and Sheffield United. Leeds are probably definitely going up. And as with Burnley and Sheffield, one of those teams is going to have to go through the playoffs. And honestly, they're all going back down. And I would give Leeds a genuine chance, as much as I dislike Leeds, and I'd love to just say that, write them off completely. But Daniel Farke's their manager. Daniel Farke's their manager. And look at how he did with Norwich in the Premier League. They didn't crack 30 points once. So, he's not a manager who I think can adapt their style. I think Leeds have the best chance of those three. Burnley and Sheffield will go straight back down again. I think even Burnley and Sheffield United fans will agree with me that if they go up again, they'll be overwhelming favorites to get relegated again. Because now Burnley has Scott Parker, another manager who really hasn't done phenomenal in the Premier League, especially with Fulham. Fulham didn't really get it going until Marco Silva came in. So it's looking like more of the same over the next year. Hopefully, soon, we get a championship side that's just perfectly run like a Brentford was, or a Nottingham Forest just spent a lot of money. And now it's paying off for them. They're third place. But Brentford are a blueprint that it can be done. Brighton were operating on a shoestring budget when they got promoted in 2016 or 2017. Brighton got promoted with Newcastle and Huddersfield. Brighton can do it. So it can be done. It just requires you to get pretty much every transfer right. And it has to be done. You have to have savvy transfer business to survive. And the teams that have come up recently, not only is the gap big, but they've also made a lot of crappy signings. I mean, Burnley, for example, they spent $100 million last year. And none of those players did anything for them in the Premier League. I mean, they had a worse team in the Prem than they did in the Championship. So I just want to let me know your thoughts. I'm not trying to discredit what Nottingham Forest have done. For the fact that they're third is phenomenal. Like, they've built incredibly. But that first season, they spent beyond their means in a punt. A punt saying, fuck it, let's give it a shot. Let's try and stay up. And they did. And it's paid off. You just have to survive that first season usually. So let me know what you think. And this is a big problem in English football. So I think it needs to be discussed. And I think it's the perfect first discussion for this channel. Because it's relevant and not enough people are talking about it. It should be a bigger problem. Thank you for watching.